Most of the hard decisions have to do with people.
Yeah.
But this particular one was, we were desperate to find a space. It was when we were going to start the upper L, and we were just cramped in the Center Church and High Street, which was not really a great space. And we hired a consultant, and the board hired a consultant, and the news was, no, we can't buy that space, we can't raise the money. And this was not the space where we are now, it was going to be at West Village Meeting House. And that was a devastating piece. And then just desperate about where we were going to go. And ran into Dick Verkstes, who at that point was development director at Austin, and he said, and I was saying what was happening there, and he said, oh, I think we've got space, come with me. And I went over on a Sunday afternoon. He said, but I don't want to say anything to them because they don't even recognize that this whole basement is not being used. And I walked in there and went, oh yes, oh yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we started negotiations, and that's how we ended up at Austin. So the difficult decision was that we couldn't build. We had all this momentum, we were going to do it, and the consultant said, you can't raise the money. Thank God we couldn't, because the end result was much, much better. But I think that was was a moment of just like coming home and going, oh, now what are we going to do?
The most recent context that I can think of that has involved difficult decisions has been needing to think on our feet and decide on our feet through COVID. And while we had guidelines from the state, there was a fair amount of leeway in terms of how we would be implementing them. And I was extremely grateful to have such a good understanding of our community and to know the families and what they would be prioritizing, and to have built their trust with, yes, we can be in person and we are going to have space available, and what outdoor space can we adapt to do it. And having known the community and the facility, I feel like we were able to work through that period and really, bring the families along. And they were so grateful to have in-person learning for their students in the fall of 2020. Actually, even in the summer of 2020, we did a little summer camp that let us practice and see that the young children are very adaptable for wearing the masks, and the adults come along. And so going through this has been an interesting time of seeing that, you need to make a decision and have a good explanation for it and move forward with it.
Yeah, I agree with Tonya. In context, it's always, the most difficult decisions are around the people. But in relation to that, we never had any money, in that era.
We didn't.
And whatever money we had, Tonya took and stuffed in a little savings account that nobody could get to. So, and it just piled up and built up in a remarkable way as a little rainy day fund. But the point being that every day, every year, there was a decision in a consciousness kind of way around, can we have that? Should we have that? Can we afford that? Should we give a raise of this percent or that percent or no percent? Could we give financial aid to that family or this family, and that percent or this percent? And so I was so well schooled by the time I was sitting in this, collective chair, that I had learned a magic trick from Tonya, and it was that it didn't matter where the numbers were in the columns on the spreadsheet. Any one of them could move and be, and take the place of another number in another column as you needed it. You didn't, you don't need to buy that much pizza. You can you can give that money to do this and do that. You don't need to do this field trip. You can do this. So it was always about robbing Peter to pay Paul, always, and and not in a poor us way, not at all, or because we had everything we needed per se, but it did beget, the need to always be having to lean in to making a hard choice and a decision about which way to turn today, or which person to say no to today. But it was fine, and ultimately, because the community was always so strong, and because the staff was always so dedicated, everybody was all in. Everybody understood that you weren't making these decisions, in a mean-spirited or overly frugal, tight-fisted way. You were making these decisions because they were good, ultimately, for the children. Ultimately, because it all trickled down to them.
I think that's so. I hadn't thought of that in that way, Kevin, but I think that's really true. Two things that I can think about is that in a team teaching situation, people are used to working together. And so when difficult decisions had to be made, you brought everybody together to discuss, well, what's fair about staff members, children getting rebates compared to, people who are single and don't have children and aren't getting the benefit of that $5,000 or whatever it was. And the same thing happened with health insurance. What's fair? I remember long discussions with the staff about health insurance. What is fair? Is it single person? Is it single person plus spouse? What does this mean? I chose not to have children, so should I be penalized for that? But the staff sat and went through all this together, and I think there was just it always was a very strong community of people working together.